Our show tonight, and I'm pretty excited about bringing my former guest on, and I'll talk about her shortly. But I guess I need to apologize. My name is Tom Russell. I'm your host for Life Without Limits, and it's been a joy being on the show for 2.5 years, and I get to bring in so many different guests here. But again, I need to apologize. I receive questions from my audience all the time, and sometimes they pop up on my email during the show, or sometimes after the show is finished. And I try to have my guests answer those questions on the next live show, but sometimes it's just not possible. So I want to make up for it by answering the questions from two of my shows. And the first one is from a guest I had a few weeks ago, Morgan Balick. And we talked about making the decision to have a gender reassignment, and the story, it's kind of complicated to present, and we just didn't have time to pursue the full breadth of the topic. So I hope to have Morgan on my show on a later date so we can explore all the issues of being a transgender. So here are the questions that I received, and Morgan, so I was so grateful to have Morgan answer them. So Ruth asked a question: how old were you during all of this going on, meaning all the decisions about what he wanted to do with his life, and whether it be a boy or a girl? And he said, from the time I became aware there was different explanations for male and female children, all the way through my growing years. And he said, I think it was a wiring issue in my brain. And Philip asked, so did you have surgery to change over? And Morgan answered, yes, from male to female. When I moved to the less LGBT environment of the upper Midwest, I chose to live as a male again to avoid conflict. And Larry asks, so you married a woman? And yes, he said, in 1983, and we divorced in 1995. Then I had surgery in 1996. And we're still very close, and live next door to each other in a duplex. And Izzy asked, what is a transgender exactly? And he answered back, transgendered is an umbrella term that covers many subcategories such as transsexual, cross-dressers, non-binary sexual presentations, and anywhere in between the boy-girl dichotomy. And I don't think people who are intersex fall under this umbrella. So when I preface that by saying there's a lot of more complications to try to explore transgender, it's this is a reason why we couldn't cover everything. And Avery asked, did your family ever accept the way you are? Mom tried, and for the most part succeeded, and my brothers to a lesser degree. And I must say, given the time these changes took place, a lot of time was required to smooth things out, and it's still not comfortable for them. And Philip asked, was this not being accepted thing, or was it just hate? Confusion was evident for all parties, including myself, and I tried to remain understanding of their difficulties, not always successfully. But when those who were on our intolerant show or showed up, I had patience and usually disengaged. And Kyla asked, was this even a thing back in those years? Now, keep in mind that Morgan had this sex change in 1996, but back in the 60s, he was thinking about this. And Morgan answered, frankly, it's always been a thing, and many cultures throughout history have had non-binary view of gender. It has become more of a thing in my generation, I suspect, because of the influx of non-organic chemicals like plastics, etc., that mimic the natural androgen and estrogen signals that naturally occurred during fetal development. Wow, that's a lot to say. All right, Kaylee asked, did you give being a boy a chance? Not really. The confusion was so intense and so distracting that normal thinking and acting was very hard to do, and faking it wasn't working. And speaking for myself, I think I might have been able to be the boy man everybody hoped I would have been, but I don't think I could have realized that without going through the changes I went through. It was a true catch-22. Andy asked, so are you a boy or a girl? And Morgan wanted to make this very clear that it should never be an issue. And he said this, I have no interest in any or either sex for intimate engagement. In my case, this transition was not for the purposes of a relationship. It was pursued to resolve an inner conflict. And I have, after many years, landed in a place of personhood, something I think everyone should try to pursue. And men and women have far more in common than they have indifference. But there are differences, and I see both in myself, and I am comfortable with that. And he still considers himself to be a woman, but he dresses as a man because it's just too confusing. And Sally asked, "Are you being true to yourself now?" And Morgan answered, "I'm trying, and I think I am somewhat successful." And I have another set of questions here that I think I'll go through in another show, and because I want to get the show moving along if I could. And so tonight I'm bringing back a popular guest from a previous show, and you kind of have to go way back with this one because we talked July 16th of 2019, and it's been a long time. But Cherie and we have talked quite a bit of times over the past two years. But Cherie's story was, when I first started the show, we talked about bullying, and she is the poster child for that, both being bullied and being a bully. And she was victimized so terribly by bullies in junior high school and high school. Her only recourse was to become a bully just to fit in. And after journaling all of her experiences and starting in 8th grade, she wrote her memoir. It's called Victim to Victor. And I want to show the book right here for anybody who's interested. It details the brutal treatment meted upon her. And if you want to listen to her story again, you can go to my website, lifewithoutlimitshow.com, and just tap on the iHeartRadio icon and scroll down to that episode. Again, it's from July 16th, 2019. And you know how I bring up on guests who always talk about their challenges in life and how they overcame them. Well, we did that with Cherie from the previous show, but what I want to talk with Cherie about was this. And I apologize, I said your name wrong incorrectly, but I corrected myself.
It's okay.
We're going to discuss the several subject matters, not the least of which is bullying, but we're going to bring back, talk about important insights on how to treat yourself and how to believe in your self-worth. And you're going to be able to listen, or excuse me, you're going to be able to read all of her insights and everything on her blog, cheriewhite.blog. And trust me, I was working on these questions for a long time, and every time that I tried to think, well, I'm done now, bam, she posts another blog, and it's an ongoing thing because she comes up with so many things that I never would have thought of. So we're in simpatico here, Cherie, because I enjoy so much reading what you write. So thanks for coming on my show.
I'm glad to be here, Tom.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and you've gone through so much over these past 2 years, but you stay focused, and I think that's so important with what your dream is, what you want to do with your life, and yours is to help other people. So when we start talking about the subject matter about bullying, I have some questions that came from the blog. And the first question is, why is it many targets of bullying find it necessary to lie?
Well, it's not that targets of bullying like to tell falsehoods. In fact, they hated it, but they do it out of fear and terror. They lie out of desperation. A person who is under the threat of being harmed will do anything to remove that threat. And if they have to lie to save themselves, they'll do it. They lie to survive. It's a survival mechanism.
Now, how does the person who's being victimized know that person is lying? I mean, other than the fact that they know within themselves it's not the truth, but how do you know that they're lying?
Repeat the question.
Well, why is it people can't determine whether they're lying about something? The bully.
The bully?
Yeah.
It's because the bully has especially a narcissistic bully, is very practiced at the art of charm and deception. And in fact, bullies, have this charm about them, and they charm other people so much that that the halo effect takes effect, where people are judged by one great characteristic they have. People are judged to to have every characteristic about them which is good. So a lot of that is the halo effect at work. Another reason is that they lie so convincingly. They tell half truths. You know, a lot of bullies won't blatantly lie, but they tell half truths, or they take one tiny grain of truth and they spin it to fit a narrative. And that's seeing a lot of it.
Yeah, I think that's what happens is, you know, once they foment that lie all the time, they start to believe it. You know, that what they're saying is the truth. And those people around them doing the same thing. They're saying, well, he keeps saying it over and over again. Well, it must be true.
That's right. It's I call it the Gobel's effect. Yeah, you remember Joseph Gobel back in World War II. He was a propaganda minister, and one of his greatest quotes was, "Tell a lie one time, and it remains a lie. Tell a lie 1,000 times, and it becomes the truth."
Now
that's what happens.
That makes sense. I mean, there are certain people that, well, we won't go into politics, but basically, this is what happens. Anyway, you also said something on the blog, says, what are the 2 types of people you should avoid?
Okay. I 2 types. I mean, there was a dozen of them that you should avoid, but we picked out 2. Mm-hmm. So I picked out the 2 I think are the worst ones, and one of them is the gaslighter. And when people gaslight, they will nitpick and find everything wrong about you and nothing wrong about themselves. They're experts at using your shortcomings to overshadow theirs.
So you said something about what's the most ridiculous bullying advice you ever received, because you went through a lot of people who were telling you this is how you should handle things. What's the most ridiculous?
Let's see. Well, there are several bits of advice. One was to ignore them, and which that never works, because when you ignore a bully, one of 3 things will happen. Either the bully will mistake it for fear that you're scared of them, and they'll really come after you. Number 2, they will take it as disrespect, and as we all know, bullies feel entitled to respect that they don't earn. Mm-hmm. And if they don't get the respect that they feel that they are entitled to, then they retaliate, and the bullying escalates. Number 3 is that bullies are attention seekers, and if they don't get the attention that they seek, they will be relentless in that pursuit. They will try something, and if that doesn't work, they'll try another and another and another until they finally get the reaction they want out of you. And usually by that time, they've worn you down so much so that you react, and you react very explosively.
Now so when you do this, when you come up with these insights and things like this, did you kind of get the feeling of what you went through in junior high and high school? You were able to really share your experiences by coming up with those insights?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of what I write about comes from experience, but also I read a lot. And so the reading, has allowed me to put a name on it, to put a name on certain things. So anytime you put a name on something, you experienced it, you know what it felt like. But if you don't put a name on it, it's harder to explain. It's harder to articulate. So when you put it, after I started being able to put names on it, it was so much easier to articulate and communicate.
Now I want to talk about your book, From Victim to Victor. I've read your book, obviously, but you had so much pushback from people, and you still have pushback from people, right? Saying, I mean, you're not telling the truth. You're telling half truths. In fact, you're just telling lies because this never happened. How do you deal with that?
You know, how I deal with it is just knowing the truth, knowing what comes behind knowing what's behind those words, and what's behind those words that my classmates spit at me. Words you just described is insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
And fear. They're still so afraid of being exposed. And the reason why they deny what they did is because they don't want to feel dirty. Nobody wants to feel dirty. So in order to not feel dirty, they deny everything. They make me out to be the bad guy. You know, they're constantly trying to convince themselves that they're the innocent party, that I was the bad guy, that I had it coming. So, you know, it doesn't bother me that much because I know where it comes from. I know what emotions those words come from, and it's fear, and it's insecurity, and it's afraid of being exposed. And, you know, that's the bully's biggest fear right there, is to be exposed.
Yeah, I know, because I wouldn't have never thought about this. I wasn't bullied like you were, obviously, but you actually documented everything.
I did.
I seriously doubt if you thought about that at the time. Well, I think I'll turn this into a book, but you had this idea that you were going to do that, right?
Well, actually, you know, when I first started documenting it,
Mm-hmm.
that was my first idea of it being turned into a book. In the 8th grade, yes, I did think about turning it into a book.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to several times, but I don't think I was I don't think my vocabulary was as broad yet. So I kind of, you know, put it on the back burner. You know, when I started from victim to victor, I already had, of course, I took down my old journals from years and years ago, but I also had the starting of a book, which was written back in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, From Victim to Victor wasn't the title of it. It was a totally different title. But I had to pretty much rewrite it. But I also had to really dig deep. And I had to reword a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, the end product is if you had written it years and years ago, and you wouldn't have the same kind of end product that you had now, because it's a brilliant piece of work. I recommend anybody who wants to hear about Cherie's story is read Victim to Victor. It's an incredible book. Now let's go back to some other questions here, because from your blog. And one of the things you said, the question was, what are the 7 statements bullies make when they can't come up with a good excuse for the rotten behavior?
Okay, well, one of them is like, oh, well, I've got a bad feeling about this person. Or let's see, here's the list. Number 1 is, oh, she rubs me the wrong way. Number 2 is, I just don't like him. Number 3 is, I just get a bad feeling about her. Number 4 is, oh, there's just something about him that I just don't like. Number 5 is, oh, I don't know, she just gives me a bad feeling. And number 6, I just don't feel good around him. And in number 7, I don't know, something about her just scares me. You know, we've all met people who gave us the creeps. Mm-hmm. And they don't necessarily have to say anything or do anything to us. We just felt that creepy vibe off of that person. Everybody has met at least one person that gave them that feeling, right?
Right.
And I can guarantee, you know, everybody, if we're old enough, we've all met people who had an aura that just didn't feel good. But that's what makes these excuses so plausible and relatable. Now, I want you to understand that the most convincing lies will often be those that not only have a high degree of plausibility, but also relatability. And unfortunately, human beings have a natural tendency to doubt themselves, to doubt their feelings and their intuitions. And this is like a default setting. And self-doubt really flies off the charts when anything is challenged by a bully or bullies who have even a small degree of influence. In short, any bully who is highly thought of, respected, and well trusted can successfully make people trust their judgment more than they do their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that the really bad part about all this is how those 7 statements that you made about these excuses don't even relate to may not even relate to the person that they're talking about, because they don't know that they don't know that person's life, what's going on in their life. They could be going through some very traumatic experiences, bad family, and all this sort of stuff, and they hold it in, so they have no way to battle back because this is who they are, and exactly. It's really unfortunate that those statements that you made are statements made to people who are surrounding them, so it's justified by them, and so it just feeds that lie, it feeds that fear into that That's person. Right. It's really uncomfortable.
Right. And in doing this, when bullies make these kinds of statements, they successfully cast doubt on you in the eyes of others, and they provoke suspicion. And that's what it's meant to do, nothing more. We got to realize that when you like and trust someone, you also trust their judgment. Therefore, anytime they question or debate your judgment of a certain individual, you'll more than likely doubt your own senses and take that person's word for it, even if they're lying through their teeth. And all it takes is that tiny seed of doubt to begin a long smear campaign. So, we need to see it for what it is. It's a smear campaign in the making. And once that seed gets planted, watch it escalate and grow bigger from there. Watch the bully try to create bogus stories. She will also create proof to back those stories up. And she'll do it by baiting you into a verbal altercation or a fight to get a reaction out of you. We mentioned that earlier. Then she can use your normal reaction and spin it to fit her twisted narrative. That's how this scenario works. And unfortunately, it's so easy to do that it shouldn't work, but it does.
Did that work with you? Was that your situation? Because the girls were relentless in the smear campaign with you.
Yes. And they would wear me down. They would attack me and attack me and attack me and attack me. And they would do it repetitiously. It's all about repetition. Wear this person down and then get her so exhausted that she reacts. And that's exactly what they would do. They would make me react. After so long of attacking me, they would cause me to react because I was exhausted. And I just wanted it to stop. So I would react, and sometimes very, very emotionally, and they would use that, which was a very normal human reaction to being constantly harassed. I mean, a person can only take so much. So that was a normal human reaction. But they would take that and twist it and say, hey, look here, see there, I told you she was crazy. I told you she would freak out. It's just, I mean, and I didn't realize then that this has been a tactic that has been timeless and it's universal.
Right.
I mean, bullies have been pulling this tactic down through the ages.
Yeah, and that's when they knew that they had you, because once you reacted, that's the kind of response that they really, really want to get out of you. And
That's
where
right.
that's where they think that they won. And on the victim side is they realize that tack doesn't work because that situation may be over, but guess what? It's going to happen again and again and again just to get the reaction. And
Right. Just to get the reaction.
you went through years of this until you.
Oh, I know, I did.
Yeah, until you figured it out yourself that this wasn't working, so you ended up becoming the bully because that was your only way to justify what you do.
Right. Exactly. And I hate to say that because, you know, it's not something that I'm proud of. You know, that was one thing I wish I'd handled differently. You know, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have aligned with other bullied targets. I would not have bullied them.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, you're young. You're not mature enough to understand that.
Right.
But your goal here now is to teach exactly what we're talking about now is don't put up with the crap. You know, you just can't.
Right.
Now, what I liked about reading the blogs is not so much about how to react to being bullied or whatever. It's more about trying to, I don't know, just improve your self-worth. And you had something on the blog that says, you had a question about why do you say to put yourself first or you'll have nothing left of yourself?
Okay, repeat that.
Why is it, you said, why do you say you should put yourself first or you'll have nothing left for yourself?
Okay, I say that because, you know, you've heard the saying that charity starts at home. And don't get me wrong, putting others first isn't a bad thing. It shows that you care about your fellow man and that you're willing to contribute some good to the world. And it's an outstanding character to have. But when that courtesy is overdone or done at your own expense, that's when it becomes a problem. And the bad thing is that people will come to expect you, you know, to be a yes person and take their crap. You'll only attract users and abusers because they'll see you coming a mile away and they will say, oh my gosh, there's something that I can get there's somebody that I can get something out of.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, growing up, you know, I heard every excuse you could, you know, pardon me, let me go back a little bit. You know, growing up, we were conditioned to always, you know, put people before us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we were, you know, a lot of times, you know, we are taught, you know, to put ourselves last by well-meaning family members, you know, not just abusers, but well-meaning family members as well, because it's what they've been taught. But as we get older, we realize that the only thing that these well-meaning family members were doing and didn't realize that they were doing was setting us up to be doormats.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just that's no way to live. Being a doormat is no way to live, you know, because when you're a doormat, you have no power. It's like your life is completely on autopilot. You're blown around as a leaf in the wind. You're a ship without a rudder. And, you know, your direction in life becomes at the mercy of others. And it's not supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be the captain of your own ship, and you're supposed to command the direction, your life's path, no one else.
I think what I found in one of the blogs is pretty interesting because we're talking about having to deal with putting yourself first and everything. You talk about your appearance, about trying to improve your appearance, and it'll elevate your self-esteem. But sometimes, just like in your case, you did the same thing, but it didn't necessarily stop the bullying. Why is that?
It's because bullies have fragile egos. And whenever a target begins to take pride in their appearance, it shows. The boost to the target's confidence shows as well. And this intimidates the bullies because, number one, they're afraid that her appearance may outshine others, outshine theirs, pardon me.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, they're also afraid that if the target gets too confident and too sure of himself, he just might grow a spine and begin standing up to them and calling them out for their deplorable behavior. And in doing those things, he will ultimately punk them out in front of everybody and cause them to lose face and therefore lose their power and social status.
You kind of get the feeling, though, that you try and improve your appearance. I think the thing is what about doing this is it's okay, but you do it for the right reasons. Because if you do it to stop the bullying, that's not the reason why you want to do it, right? I mean, you want to do it just to gain your self-esteem back up. And once you realize you're doing it for yourself, it doesn't really matter what other people think, because that's who you are. And if you end up becoming something that really isn't you, you're going on the wrong path.
That's right. Yeah, that's the one point I'm trying to make if you're going to, it's good to improve your appearance, but do it to make yourself feel better. Don't do it because somebody else wants you to. You have to do it for you.
Let's talk about, because we talked about this a little briefly, is talk about the art of distraction or deflection.
Well, let's see. The art of distraction is basically what bullies do. They distract. That's another reason why they bait you, is because they use your reaction not only to make you look like a fool, but they do it to cover their own. If everybody's too busy paying attention to you and your crazy reactions, they're not going to be looking at them. So that's what deflection and distraction is about. Mm-hmm. Bullies project, their own shortcomings onto the target to make it look like, to hide their own insecurity. That's a part of distraction as well.
Now we talked about, of course, we're talking about COVID on occasion on some of my shows, but in one of your blogs, you made a really interesting comment about quarantining yourself from negative people. How is that possible? You're able to do that?
Well, now, of course, if you work alongside a coworker, that might be in some cases that's impossible. However, in most cases it's not. And how you quarantine yourself from negative people is to avoid them and surround yourself with the people that make you feel good, people who are positive, people who are happy and build you up, not people who tear you down. You also do that by walking away from toxic relationships. If you have a relationship that does not fulfill you, that makes you feel bad about yourself, then it's time to end that relationship. Now, granted, you might be alone for a little while, but wouldn't you rather be alone than to put up with somebody who constantly berates you and tears you down? I mean, I would certainly rather be by myself than to be with somebody that does that to me.
Yeah, because when you wake up every morning, you think about, okay, what's going to happen today?
That's right.
Rather than what am I going to do to make something good happen in my life? What's something bad going to happen in my life based on the behaviors of somebody who's trying to rip you down constantly? That's right. It's really difficult. You also said that, because you talked about the 7 statements bullies make, but you also had a blog that talked about your 12 takeaways from being bullied. What were those?
Well, let's see. They were, number one, it basically gave me a better sense of people.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me the ability to detect lies, because if you've been around bullies and liars long enough, I mean, you develop a sixth sense of that. You know, you recognize the tones of voice, the pantomimes, everything. And so you can see a lie a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, you can also spot a bully a mile away. You pay extra attention to people's body language, their facial expressions, how they carry themselves, their tone of voice, their overall demeanor can tell you whether they're a person that you really need to be around. And, you know, that was one of my takeaways. Another takeaway was rooting for the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always be for the underdog because I was one myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the underdog to me is the strongest, most resilient, and you have to respect it. And so I will always cheer for the underdog. It also gave me empathy and compassion. I know what it's like to feel hate. I know what it's like to be abused. I know what it's like to be trampled underfoot and, you know, blind under a boot heel. And so it gave me compassion and empathy for other people, especially for people who are downtrodden.
So you also talked about explaining why the silent treatment is and how you handle it. How do you handle that?
Well, the first thing to do is to basically, okay, I just lost my train of thought here. The first thing to do is to call it out. Well, actually, to know what it is, to see it for what it is. And what it is emotional manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
And call that out and tell the person, that's not going to work on me. If you think that giving me the silent treatment is going to make me give you what you want, then you've got another thing coming. And the best thing to do is just to boot that person out of your life, because again, it's emotional manipulation and you don't need that in your life. Another thing you can do is look on the bright side. If they're not talking to you, that means they're not in your face giving you grief. So shoot, enjoy it. There were plenty of times that my classmates gave me the silent treatment. Oh shoot, that was the best thing that happened to me, because they weren't in my face. They weren't yelling at me. They weren't coming after me. And I thought, woohoo, I'm going to enjoy this. Peace and quiet.
Well, I think what happens though, doing the silent treatment's okay. But I'm thinking that, that's what I always tell some of the kids I talk to, is listen, if you're not getting any responses or any comments are coming from people, it's going to come from somewhere else. You start to think about, okay, I'm constantly berated. Now they're not saying anything to me. You kind of get paranoid. That's something else is the other shoe is going to drop.
Right.
You also said in one of your blogs, I want you to explain why having and setting boundaries is a must.
Because if you don't set boundaries, people are just going to walk all over you. And like I said earlier, it attracts users and abusers. They see you a mile away. Abusers have they have a skilled ability to pick out victims. They watch people carefully. These people are avid people watchers. And I mean, they are constantly, it's like they have a radar for potential victims. They watch your body language. They watch your demeanor, the way you carry yourself. They listen to your tone of voice. They watch your facial expressions, your posture, whether you look down or not, whether you have your head up. They notice all of these little micro micro flashes and micro body language. They can pick out, even the slightest. So they have a knack for finding victims. And I just want,
What's that?
No, repeat the question again.
About setting boundaries.
Yes. So if you don't set boundaries, you are going to attract these kinds of people because they're going to see you a mile away. Mm-hmm. Also, you have to set boundaries to, people are not going to respect you if you don't set boundaries. You're going to be a doormat, and that's no way to live. You have to set boundaries. Everybody has to set boundaries. It's how we are able to live in peace and harmony. People that live in peace and harmony, they're people who set boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's been years since you went through junior high and high school and all that sort of stuff. The culture obviously has changed, and back then it wasn't addressed as much as it is now, obviously.
Right.
How are you able to, I want to say this right away. What you went through back in the early days, how does that relate to what's going on in schools and workplace right now?
Well, it's pretty much the same behavior, only it's not only done in person anymore, it's done online too. Mm-hmm. So it's the same behavior. This kind of behavior, it's not only universal, it's timeless. Mm-hmm. People have been exhibiting the same kind of bad behavior down through the millennia. And all it takes, you have to really understand the ins and outs of it. It's nothing new. It's been going on since the beginning of time.
Oh, I know you. And I've made a comment in one of my shows about in the Bible, you have several references of someone being bullied by either a family member or David and Goliath is one of the biggest things. Joseph
and his brothers.
Cain and Abel, obviously. Jesus. The Pharisees, lambasting him constantly. But of course, he always had the right answer and everything. One of the things that you put on there, this is a question that I wanted to ask. Would you rather be hated for being smart or pitied for being dumb?
I would rather be hated for being smart, and I would hope everyone else would too. Sadly, that's not the case, because a lot of people try to cover their intelligence because they're so afraid of being hated and afraid of being bullied. And but they need to understand that the reason why bullies hate smart people is because smart people show them up. Remember earlier we said that bullies don't like to be outshined. They don't like to be outdone. And if there's somebody out there smarter than them, they're going to bully them to try to get them to dumb down a little bit and steer a little fear in them to try to get them to dumb down, so that this smart person don't make them look so stupid.
Yeah, I had the same issue when I was younger because I felt I didn't really fit in. I wasn't dumb by any means, but I was treated with kid gloves, kind of, when I was going through school, because they didn't know how to treat me.
Right.
And so that they weren't really necessarily mean to me, but I other than making fun of my nose. But I dealt with that later on in my life. But I just felt like it's really hard to fit in if you don't fit in a certain clique or a certain category.
Right.
So how can people reach you?
You can reach me on my blog at www.cheriewhite.blog. And anyway, it'll take you to my WordPress blog, Chateau Cherie, and it will tell you, pretty much everything you need to know about bullying.
I totally agree. Like I said at the beginning of the show, in detail, because I never would have thought of that. But you speak from experience, and then sometimes you get talking heads from people who aren't really in the arena of
right.
being bullied. But I mean, you've experienced it, so your goal is changed again from being a victim to victor. And again, if anybody is watching this show on YouTube or listening to the show live or on iHeartRadio, get her book, Victim to Victor. It's I gotta tell you, I was uncomfortable reading it, Cherie, only because I felt uncomfortable for you, what you went through. And
right.
I said, nobody should go through that. Years and years and years of this. But the beauty of you is you've turned your life around and chose not to be that victim anymore. And it's such a blessing to be able to talk to you, because you, by coming on my show these past 2 times, you are impacting those people who are going through similar things or have gone through similar things. And it's a joy. It's a total joy.
Thank you.
All right. The books. We talked about Victim to Victor, but by golly, you wrote more than one book. What are the other books you've read or written?
I have the other 3 are fictions. The one is entitled Townies, Cronies, and Hayseeds. One woman's struggle with the underbelly of small town politics. The other one is The Vow of Chastity Baker, where a prostitute is she starts out as a teenage prostitute, and then she wants to change her ways and go into polite society.
Mm-hmm.
And she endures a lot of bullying because people find out about her past. And then there's a Kids Under the Latchkey, and it's a first person narrative told by a woman who witnessed the bullying of a mentally handicapped young man when she was just a teenager.
Man, I have the Cronies book, but I don't have the other 2, I don't think. But you can get them from where?
Amazon.
Amazon.
They're available at Amazon.
Gotcha. And again, I'm holding up the book here from Victim to Victor, and it's a long book, but Cherie, I think it took me 2 days to read this thing. I could not put this thing down. I said, I got to see where you end up. Of course, I knew your story ahead of time, but going through what you went through before and having you on a show, man, it made total sense. So again, thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom. It's an honor. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Well, that's what I love about doing the show is because I don't like it, and I told this before, is I don't like this to be a one-off, because we're instantly friends, and we may not talk to each other every day or even every week, but we know that we have connections somewhere. Bullying is obviously one thing, but I mean, you have so much character, so much integrity, so much class. It's beyond compare. And I am blessed and privileged to have you on my show. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and as I end all my shows, and I fully believe this every single day, I want everyone to smile infectiously, laugh genuinely, love unconditionally, and live courageously. I believe in all of you. Have a great week, folks.